just having people to talk to that maybe understand your language,
Yeah.
I think is important.
So
Even if
important.
the content, the bulk of it, the meat of it isn't always work, to have somebody understand you from a certain angle. And I still talk to people from the music world very much in the same way. I just want to bounce ideas off of them, and I want them, you want to feel heard, but then you also want to do the same. You want to reciprocate for that person. I think that's really important.
Welcome back to the Bombshell Business Podcast. I'm your host, Amber Hurdle, and this week is the vacation rental, short-term rental, takeover week of the Bombshell Business Podcast. It is in between the Book Direct Conference in Miami and the International Vacation Rental Management Association Conference in Las Vegas, and I'm here to highlight some of my friends and people I've gotten to know in this industry that has pretty much adopted me, and I'm very happy to be a part of it. So today's guest is someone I've had the privilege to get to know over the past year-ish or so. And as a brand connoisseur myself, I have developed a really deep respect for her unapologetically authentic personal brand. And so what I've learned about her is that she's found a way to pursue both her passion and her vocation, and that be a satisfying experience all the way around. And as different as they may be, it's working. And so the other layer to this is, while overcoming limiting beliefs that we all have Gertrude, right? She still successfully defined and positioned her value within the industry. And importantly for me anyway, and I'm assuming for a lot of bombshells who are listening or watching, I've really fallen in love with her deep intention in all areas of her life while nurturing the connections that she's made along the way. So when you look at Sarah, you get to know who Sarah is by how she presents herself to the world and how she interacts with the world, but you also can observe how important other people are to her. And that's just a really cool thing to watch. So now that you've heard my kind of like behind the scenes on Sarah, let me read to you a little bit more about her and what makes her her. So Sarah Franzen is Director of Revenue Management and Analytics at Natural Retreats, a luxury vacation rental management company. And she is the recipient of the inaugural Vacation Rental Revenue Manager of the Year Award presented at the DARM conference in 2021. And for those of you not in the industry, DARM is the Data and Revenue Management Conference. It's the cat's meow event of the year. And Sarah won the very first award. This is very prestigious. So methodical, yet a creative, strategic thinker and doer, Sarah is a seasoned professional with a dynamic experience and education in sales, business, marketing, revenue management, and the performing arts. She's kind of a Renaissance woman with an MBA from the Terry College of Business, whoop, whoop, at the University of Georgia, go Dogs, a Master of Music from San Jose State University, and a double undergrad major in both music, vocal performance, and business statistics. Sarah is passionate about arts and education, obviously, understanding human behavior and what drives it, and establishing and nurturing mutually beneficial relationships with her global community. So if you're not as thoroughly impressed by me right now, you just need to end this episode and move on, because I don't know how you're going to be any more impressed. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It is a privilege to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to your perspective on some things that I think you would be expert at talking about. So you ready to go?
We'll see.
Okay. So I think one of the first things that really pops out, I think for most people who know you, is like you've got this, they've proven left brain, right brain wrong now. Like everything that we ever learned has been disproven. But if we want to use those terms, like you have this very left brain type of day-to-day work experience dealing with data and revenue management and dynamic pricing models and all kinds of like really methodical stuff. And then you have this right brain side of this music experience. So can you just automatically just start with walking us through how those two things make sense for you?
Yeah. So I didn't know that they had debunked a lot of the right brain, left brain thing. I didn't actually know that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting to me because, as I was growing up, you take those tests, they tell you if your right brain, your left brain. I was always like right down the middle. Like there was never one side or the other. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. So I always called myself center brained because I just never really found one side. I did, for the first part of my career, I did spend it in the arts. So I performed and I taught, and that was kind of the first part of my career, I guess. I had a music school. So that was kind of the business side of it. And that's actually what prompted my work toward the MBA, because I wanted just to observe and learn more about the business side of things. My business analytics side was more numbers and less like, how do you run a business and how do you market yourself and all that stuff. So I've always said, the first part was music and the arts. And then the second part, which is where I'm residing now, is, definitely on the business side of things. So I've had the, I would say, luxury of my vocation being in both.
Yeah.
But I will say that I prefer this setup because I think it's always easier to pursue a passion like music when you have like this kind of vocation set up, as opposed to how do you pursue analytics when you're a musician or an artist? That's harder. So I do think, I am kind of cut out. That's just how my brain works to really, be drawn to both sides. And so I'm just very fortunate that I found kind of a place to just kind of sit where I am right now and be able to also experience the artistic and the things that I'm really passionate about on that end.
It is interesting because I have found a lot of women, especially, and not as much of this side of things has been shared to me by my male clients, but it's like a lot of women feel like they have to choose, like they have to, just this is their lane. And like, there's almost like shame around being multi-passionate because you might look like you're all over the place. And as a multi-passionate person myself, who does come down the middle and testing on, do I make objective decisions or subjective decisions? Am I more creative or am I more analytical? You're just a really great example of saying like, why can't you have it all?
Yeah. I mean, I've been, I'm one of those people that regardless of what it is, if somebody's ever said that I can't have it all, I'm usually the person to try to, prove that theory false. But I really do feel like I've got a really great setup in terms of, what I do vocationally, but also my avocational interests and passions are there and they're accessible and they feed me in the way that I need them to.
And I'm a daughter of a drummer, so music has always been a part of my life, but there is an analytical side to music. I mean, to the composition of music, to the interpretation of music, to, even just playing music. It's very,
very
technical. It is cut and dry, it's black and white.
Yeah. I mean, there is, that's why when I teach, I still teach a couple students. My husband's also a teacher as well. He teaches piano. And, there's a reason when you teach what, you really have to approach the pedagogy from a very technical side. But then once you teach the technique, you also have to make sure that you're drawing out the artistic side. And I think a really good teacher, and I'm not categorizing myself as one right now. I think a really good teacher who has the time to really devote to creating the best artists are the ones that merge the two in the beginning. So there's no technique without artistry, and there's no artistry without technique. I mean, you need both of them. And I do think that's a really great metaphor for, any sort of task or vocation even that you take on.
Yeah.
I think you need both.
You do need both. And like, as a speaker, I've joked a few years ago that I really leaned into the more technical aspect of speaking. I felt like I was Nancy Kerrigan. And it's like, her artistry is beautiful, but until she can land that triple salchow, she's just not going to get the technical points. Like, that's how I felt as a speaker. And I'm like, I can crush it on stage, but I might miss a couple technical things that nobody else knows necessarily, but does it impact the reception of it in the end? Absolutely. So it's like leaning, wherever you tend to lean, it's finding that balance and making sure that, you're honoring all sides of that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, okay. So the other thing that I've just, even some of the things you just said of like, well, this is just how I did it. And if somebody tells me I can't, that's more fodder for me to figure out how have you gotten to be just so unapologetically you? Like I've never gotten any vibes like you're seeking external validation, like you have a confident presence about yourself, which is attractive to somebody like me who is confident, because I know that I don't have to like measure myself around you.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's just always kind of been who I am. Now, I think over the years, as I've gotten older,
Yeah.
I've learned the art of nuance and you can't always say what you think without a
Right.
filter. There are times and places I think that I have failed in many instances in the past in particular. I definitely am very aware of that now. But I think that, oftentimes we talk about, a filter on somebody, and I don't know if even that's the right way to look at it. And I'm just, kind of words are just coming out of my mouth right now, so I don't even know if I'm going to make sense. But I think sometimes it's maybe not so much a filter as because I think it's possible to still say what you want and be very direct about it in ways that are sensitive
Mm-hmm.
and graceful.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm definitely not somebody who I would consider graceful on a lot of topics. I think it is important to me that people know who I am and where I'm coming from and where I stand. I wouldn't ever want there to be confusion about that.
Yeah.
And if there ever has been confusion about it, I'm always the kind of person that wants to clear it up right away. I don't like the feeling, and I don't like the thought of, somebody having this notion about me that might not be right, and then them carrying on with that, believing certain things. And it's usually my fault because I haven't communicated something correctly. I will always I'll always own that. But I think it's important that people understand, each other, like at their core, like the foundation of the person. And if you just kind of put up this facade and let people kind of run with what they think you are, or who they think that you are, I think it's really difficult in the long run to have any sort of meaningful relationship that way. So whether it's a work relationship or, a friendship or whatever, it's once you realize that there's kind of this misalignment in understanding, I think it's important to like nip that one in the bud. So I think ever since I was a kid, my parents were always, how are you feeling? What do you mean? Asking for clarity from me. If there was ever anything unclear. So I always appreciated that. Maybe not at the time. I didn't appreciate that particularly as a teenager, but I mean, it was always there. It was always this expectation that you had to communicate what you meant and how you felt. So I think I've just kind of carried that on. I don't know that there's any special recipe for that.
Yeah. Well, it's helpful to know that that's how you were raised, because not everybody was raised that way. And as you know, I live in the South. And so in the South, a lot of it is put your happy face on, there's a lot of, I'm going to talk trash about you until you get cancer. Then I'm going to show up every day at your house with a casserole. Like there's just, it's a bizarre dynamic, not with everybody, but like, that's kind of the underpinning of the Southern way, is just like, there's that kind versus nice, right?
Well, I definitely can fall into that if I want to. It's easy to to do that. It's easy just to kind of let something go and, all right, well, I'm not gonna like, not gonna, rock the boat. I'm just gonna sit back and let it happen because I don't want to offend anybody and I don't want, someone not to like me. But I kind of feel like people tend to like people who are honest and who will communicate. And that's also not to say that like my upbringing was, that my parents were always like that. There was definitely times where you just, shut your mouth,
Right.
smile, and shake this person's hand.
Right.
There was definitely that too. And I think that there's a time and place for that. I don't think that's one of the things, we were talking a little bit before, we have daughters who are around the same age. And that is one of those things that, it's just part of this, of the culture and the society today where it's, everything can be just picked apart. And, I have to feel really good about everything that I do. And I have to, and sometimes I do believe there's a time and place for just close your mouth, smile, get through this, and then we'll talk about it later. So I think there's a time and place for that too.
Yeah. Well, and you just so beautifully unpack like the intention of a personal brand anyway. And a lot of people, they hear personal brand and they hear like this public persona they have to shape and put together and position and put it out there. And like that, no, that's not what a personal brand is. A personal brand is ensuring that whoever you're interacting with understands who you are at your core. And if there is a disconnect there, that's when we start looking at, well, what steps do we need to take to ensure how people perceive you is a reflection of your genuine intention? And I think that that's the balance that I've observed, in the past year or so with you that has been very consistent. And the other word that I used as I was introducing you, it's your intention. So it's the word choices that you use. It is how you frame things. You're not haphazard in how you go about your communication. So where does that come from?
Probably a deep-seated fear of being wrong.
Okay, that's fair.
and to that point, I made a comment just a few minutes ago about daughters. I have a daughter. I believe your son is my daughter's age. I can't remember what we had said.
Brittany's 26, Derek will be 20.
Oh, it was your daughter. Okay.
So it is your daughter. Yeah.
I was, after I said that, that's immediately what I went to was, I think I said that wrong.
Oh no. Okay.
So again, it's not, and it's a fear. It's when I say it's a fear of being wrong, I think a lot of that is true. Not fear in terms of, oh, what will Amber say because she's, because I made a mistake, but I really try to be accurate and I try to be right. So like somebody who's always trying to be accurate, like when you think about what you need to say or what you want to say, I think there's more pause there. And I do give pause a lot of times. I mean, this is a little bit different because, I don't really know exactly what you're going to ask. And so it's a little bit, strange for me because I don't have the opportunity to just say, you know what, let's come back to that in 10 minutes. I don't have an answer for you. This is a podcast. Like I need to answer. But I do think there is some truth to that. Like this, I live and I've always been somebody who always wants to be right and accurate, not right in the sense of like a selfish right, but correct. And so I think that is probably that's probably very true.
Well, and I think that's a value that we share, and maybe why I'm kind of like, oh, who's a Sarah person? Is the truth matters to both of us. That's the true representation of me. I want to know the truth about you so I can evaluate, are you somebody who aligns with me or no? And if no, that's fine. But like I'm protective of my space. And then like being truthful about what we're communicating, which is why I can see that of like, because your word choices and, I interact with a lot of people and you use very specific words to describe very specific things that are not in the common vernacular. And being a wordsmith myself, I'm always like, oh, that's a pretty word. That's a great word for that. Like it's mind candy to me. So would you say that like the truth or integrity, that's like a strong core value of yours?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not even, is A true or is B true, but, let's talk about how there's truth in both of them.
Both.
And I think that, wanting to get to the truth or wanting to get to the core of something is really, it's a goal of mine in everything that I do. And it can be somewhat debilitating, I think, because it's easy to go down those rabbit holes.
Mm-hmm.
But, when I see anything, we don't really have TV. So when I watch TV, it's like this, deer in the headlights, like, what are all these things? But I'll grab onto certain things like, different commercials, and certain things will just really sit with me for a long time. Like I'll think about them weeks later.
Oh yeah.
Because I think that there's just a lot of stuff that is so surface in our world right now. And we don't often, collective, we don't often take the time to dig much further.
Mm-hmm.
But those are things that are influencing us and that are, influencing our behaviors, or that are, influencing other people's behaviors around us that affect us. And so those are the kinds of things that, when you talk about really wanting to get to the truth of something, getting to the core of it, the fundamentals, those are really important to me.
And I think that's, because it is so important to me. And let's be real, I live a very weird life. I get on airplanes all the time. Like the airport is my second home, and I go only to places where people want to grow personally or professionally. Like in my business, I am only exposed to people who are hungry to become a better version of themselves. And then when I'm not on an airplane or on a stage, my day is full of coaching or consulting, and like being in the inner core of people's identities, their business identities, their P&L, like they're bearing their everything to me. And so I'm living in the deep end all the time. So it is kind of not a strange, but like I have to shift gears when I go out into the normal world. And so like, even just sitting across from you when we had dinner at this year's DARM conference, just knowing I was across from somebody who had substance, and not to say that like not everybody, I mean,
Sure.
we know that how many amazing, like that's why I love the vacation rental industry, is just full of incredible humans. But there's that side of you that it's like, it feels like home to me. So when you're putting yourself out there, it's like a beacon for people who are like you or who like to operate at your frequency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And I, to just kind of, I guess, riff on that a little bit. I felt very much the same way when we were sitting there talking. It was really the first time that we had a kind of any sort of meaty conversation,
right? Not just
with each other,
chatting back and forth on LinkedIn.
How's it going? Yeah. But it was very much the same thing. And I think there were a couple of things that I told you that night that I'm always an open book. I will tell anybody anything. I really don't, I'm not going to hide anything. But it was the kind of thing where I had this sense that I could talk to you. And I have those same kinds of thoughts and feelings, with other people maybe I've just met, people that maybe I've known for a long time, where I know the kinds of things that I can talk about with certain people, and even people I haven't known for very long. I know exactly what I can say and what I can't, without fear of, not, I can say anything I want, but, without fear of them, poking fun or, tearing something apart in a really, otherwise social setting.
Right. Like it goes awkward quick.
Yeah. Because there are some people who don't really know how to handle that. But no, I felt that way very much with you as well. And I think that is unique. And I think everybody kind of has that unique person or personality kind of that they connect to. So it's different for everyone, but it was definitely something where, it was like this, oh, she's a substantive person. Oh, she has really valuable things and insight, to share. And I was really into that.
Well,
so yeah, completely agree.
And to kind of break the what is it, the third wall or the fourth wall? I don't know what it is, but to talk to you directly, Bombshell, the reason why I'm even bringing this up, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have Sarah on the show is to highlight that when you do understand your brand, your personality, what you're about, like how you want to show up in the world, when you're very secure in that, not only does that provide you with the opportunity to just stand in your personal power, no matter who's coming your way, but it also gives you the opportunity to, when you know yourself, then you know who is like you know who you're vibing with. And then you also will dramatically feel the contrast when you're very grounded in yourself and then the opposite of you is out there. And that's not to say we don't interact with, like, even have fun hanging out with, but like, you just know naturally when you have that level of self-awareness, and then we present it as our quote personal brand, you kind of know who your people, your real people are, that, you know, that sort of thing. And it makes life and business and everything so much easier.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And it's something that I think that I've been more aware of, probably in the last decade or so, is just, you know, people have their people. And just because this person over here is not my person, they're somebody else's person.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with them.
They're gonna vibe with somebody else.
Yeah.
But you know, I've been very deliberate about the people that I open up to and the people with whom, you know, I spend time, because my time is valuable. Everyone's time is valuable. And so you really want to be selective about that. And because I think the people around you grow you, you know, they influence you. And I think over the past, like I said, over the past decade or so, it's been increasingly clear to me that there are people that do that, do very positive things for me. And there are people that don't. And that's okay. They're probably wonderful people. I'm just not going to take extra time to spend with them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, time is finite. And I think that's a really good segue, because I think, you know, I've obviously observed your levels of relationships within the industry. And for those of you who aren't in the vacation rental industry, there is no industry more active on LinkedIn than the vacation rental industry, just to be clear. Like I work in multiple industries, but I'm telling you right now, like, my feed is, when I do employer brand reviews with companies in the vacation rental industry and they're not on LinkedIn, I'm like, let me show you my feed so you understand how important it is for you to have your LinkedIn together. But I digress. So, but it was when you presented this year's award for vacation rental revenue manager of the year, because you were the previous winner and then you were bestowing it upon somebody who was your friend. And even just hearing you all talk back and forth about that relationship, I guess maybe if you could just unpack that, like the importance of having people that you can lean into within your industry or personally or whatever. Can you touch on that? Yeah.
I'd love to. That's one of my favorite things to talk about, actually, or at least to think about. I don't really talk about it with many people. So Cameron Felton was the winner this year, who is a wonderful friend, who is also a counterpart. So he does very similar work to what I do in his company. And I got to know Cameron at the very first DARM that was in Atlanta, I believe it was. And that's when we met in person. And there was kind of that same thing, that kind of connection where you're like, you know, I like this person. This human being is a really unique human being, and I really like him. And so it was around that time when I had started being very deliberate in reaching out to folks both in the vacation rental industry and even some that are not in the vacation rental industry. And I started calling them my thought partners. And I attempt to meet with them at least quarterly, if not monthly. Cameron and I do every other month. I've got a couple other folks that I do quarterly. I have somebody that I meet with monthly. And most of them are in the VR industry. But surprisingly, we don't talk a lot about VR when we meet. These are people that I vibe with, that share oftentimes common values, or at least a similar perspective on life in general. And they're people that I talk to about challenges that I have in my life that are oftentimes work, but oftentimes not. And they've been invaluable resources for me, mentors, just confidants, people that we commit to a confidence. You know, this is something, you know, often Cameron and I are competitors.
Yeah.
You know, this is something that, you know, we have to respect each other and each other's companies and positions enough to know that, hey, whatever we talk about, if it has to do with work, obviously we're going to keep this
Right.
to ourselves. That's a really important thing. And it's something that you build over time. You build this trust. And I've been able to build this trust with my thought partners. And again, that just having people to talk to that maybe understand your language, I think is important.
So
even if the content, the bulk of it, the meat of it isn't always work, to have somebody understand you from a certain angle. And I still talk to people from the music world very much in the same way. I just want to bounce ideas off of them, and I want them, you want to feel heard, but then you also want to do the same. You want to reciprocate for that person. I think that's really important. Those relationships have, I think I said it at the conference. I mean, I credit those relationships for certainly my professional growth over the last several years. I mean, that has been invaluable for me, but also my personal growth. I think that's been, it's been very, very much beneficial in that sense as well. I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah. And it goes back to that, like, okay, who am I vibing with? Okay, I'm going to invite them in, because whoever you surround yourself with and whoever are your thought partners, I love how you phrase that. That is who is influencing your becoming. And so if you have people that are distracted and, they don't really know what they want in the world, and, I'm here for a good time, not for a long time kind of people, which, listen, I had that season, no judgment. Like, if that's where you are in your journey, that is where you are, and good for you. Rock it out, like get your yah-yahs out, or maybe yah-yah your life away if that's what life is good means to you. But if you are somebody who's just constantly looking to continuously evolve and become better and better, you need people who share that. And so I love, again, there's that word intention that you have around, like, being very systematized about that. While also I see the organic side of things as well. So I have to ask, because I know you've talked about this even on stage at industry experiences, and it is such an important piece of having that thought partnership relationship, or tribe, if you will. You're award winning, you work for an impressive company to begin with. You're known in the industry for being a baddie, and everybody likes you, or everybody I've ever talked to or observed. And yet you still sometimes have those limiting beliefs that maybe some of those people have to remind you of who you are. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Daily. Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I think it kind of goes back to, how we started out. When you're trying to do a good job at anything, you're trying everything that you can think of. You're experimenting, you're exploring, you're leaning on other people, you're leaning on resources, and you really want to do a good job. For our industry, in the VR industry, my particular discipline of revenue management has not been around for a long time. So, when I started in the industry, it was, I wouldn't say revenue management was non-existent, but it was very, very much in its infancy. And if anything, it's maybe in toddlerhood right now.
Right. It's the wild, wild west in VR.
It really is. And so, couple that with, really wanting to do a good job when there's not even necessarily an industry standard of what a good job means. There is this sense, and you're right, I have spoken about it, on a stage in front of hundreds of people, which is mortifying to me. But there is this sense of, like, am I a total fraud? Like, do I know what I'm talking about? Imposter syndrome is very real in a lot of ways for me. I question everything I do. I mean, I think a lot of people question what they do. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times, you question what you're doing, and there's no answer. Like, are you right? Well, I don't know. And it was when back in 2021, when you mentioned the award, I was shocked. And two, I was like, you can't give this to me. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know, I mean, that's kind of like how, and I'm sure anyone in our industry who gets that award is probably going to feel the same way. Like, well, I don't know, we're just doing our best, we're trying to make data-driven decisions and, all that stuff. So, but there is definitely that sense of, questioning all the time, everything you do. Our job is to forecast, our job is to guess in a lot of ways. And I'm wrong a lot. I mean, anyone in our industry is wrong a lot. And that's just, those are just the odds. We're right sometimes. And hopefully you're right a lot as well. But it's one of those disciplines that, there isn't necessarily a right answer. You say, if you make X dollars, could you have made X plus 1,000 if you had done something different? And there's no answer to that.
It's just harder to benchmark because and I saw when I creeped on you on LinkedIn a little bit more, that you have a hotel background like me. And so when you're talking about RevPAR, RevPOR and all that kind of stuff, and you're talking about on average, a hotel is like 300-ish rooms. If you come from like a Gaylord or, something like me, then it might be 2,881, no big deal. But
not that you remember or anything.
Yeah, I mean, not that I know it off the top of my head. It's just a few extra rooms. But when Marriott bought us, I was like, you guys run 300 room hotels. We have a letter and a number in our hotel rooms. Like, how's this even going to work? But, and not to take Marriott's great, but it was just like, what a difference. But the thing about hotels, I still love, and I love working in that industry. It's more sophisticated. And when I say sophisticated, I don't mean like better than, it's just like the systems are more sophisticated. There are more benchmarks. There's more markers to look to understand what success looks like. And you're talking about 300 rooms, we'll say, maybe a pool, maximum 2 pools, maybe if you're crazy, 3 pools, if it's a big resort. And, a hot tub or 2, and then the laundry gets disseminated throughout all the different, the conference center, the guest rooms or whatever, and it's all contained. In vacation rental world, it's like, we've got 300 units across 4 different states. The laundry operation just blows my mind. I mean, that's the first thing I'm like, can I tour your laundry operation? I want to see how this all works. Then you have different competition. Then you have all the OTAs. So those don't speak the language, online travel agencies, the Airbnbs, the Verbos. You have the individual managers versus the professionally managed units. Nothing is the same. And then you're trying to run this company with different styles of houses and different rooms and different bathrooms and different amenities and different locations in a consistent way. Like, does your brain just not want to fall out of your head on some days?
No, that you but just about nailed it right there. That's exactly why I live in the in the state that I do. I am completely messed up for this exact reason.
Okay.
Yeah, my brain can't, it is really, it's really overwhelming. And so then when you start thinking about, am I doing a good job? Mm-hmm. Am I being successful? Is what I'm doing being effective? Am I optimizing? Those are all questions that every single time I think about it, the first answer is no. Well, no, 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 and no. Because how in the world can you take all of those inputs, come up with an answer and get it right? And so, that really is a daily thing that I struggle with. Some days are better than others, obviously. And I'm usually able to just say, okay, I'm living in the trees right now. Sarah, you need to get out and look at, be the forest. You need to really just step back. I think one of the things that I am able to do well is to step back and look at things from a forest level. I am, it's really tough to admit because my vocation is revenue management. My strength is not in the detail. My strength is, in the structure. So it's challenging for me to be in the detail. And I think because of that, that's probably why I have so many issues with all of these. Am I right? Am I right? Am I right? Because I'm looking at, if you get stuck there,
yeah,
it's really, but once I can pull myself out, I can look at the full picture and say, okay, that one decision that you made right here, right or wrong, it's one decision and you use it to move on to the next thing.
That's right.
And that's where I definitely try to live. But I would be lying if I said that I don't feel that every day.
Yeah.
But I'm very grateful that my brain also is the kind of brain that will take me out of that and allow me to see high level structural things.
So you have like just the natural brain, then you have these thought partners. And for our listeners who do get into that imposter syndrome vortex, is there anything else that you would add to that just natural inclination and good people telling you otherwise that you would say, here's steps 1 and 2 of getting yourself out of imposter syndrome zone?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I tend to document everything. I'm very, methodical in what I do. I write down things that bother me. Oftentimes it's just in a notebook, just a line of something that I come across that is really bothering me, and I'll write it down. And then that's a very physical way of me just getting rid of it for the moment. So I can like write it down and I can move on. And sometimes I need to do that in order to move on because I'll find that rabbit hole. But, and at the end of a period of time, sometimes it's the day, sometimes it's the week, I can look at these things, and then because I've got some space between them, I'm able to approach them with a little bit more of a methodical approach, as opposed to being really emotionally attached to these things that are giving me a hard time in the moment. So that I do that, and I found that for me that's very useful. I don't know that it would be useful for everybody, but to actually see them in black and white, to see them written down, and then for me to either be able to erase them or to be able to come up with a solution, or for me to say, that was just really stupid that you were bothered so much by that. Just turn the page kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's been really helpful for me too.
So good. I love that. Just putting some space, because either you realize it doesn't really matter at all, or you've given yourself the space to look at it with a fresh lens, maybe have a little more grace for yourself. And
a lot of times you write it down and 2 hours later or 2 days later, something else happens that completely negates the need for that.
Yeah.
Initially. So, it's also therapeutic in being able to look at it that way. Say, I don't know everything I need to know right now in this moment. Like sometimes there's going to be other stuff that comes along that will address that and will take care of it. Yeah. And it's helpful for me to see that actually does happen in life.
Yeah. With consistency, like you can count on it. Yeah.
Exactly. That's been useful.
And you're in the eye of the storm, because not only are you in this like voraciously growing industry, and then there's all kinds of private money being dumped in. And then, then you have all these people on, like, it cracks me up. I get exposed to things probably because I am so deep into the industry now. So I get like all of these people that pop up. It's like, get rich quick with short-term rentals. And I'm like, oh, there is nothing easy or quick, or like, if you think this is some quote passive income project, you are so misinformed. And so you're in this world, and then there's like the ever evolving, just the industry is trying to come together and put some standards together, but you're babies, like it is a toddler.
Absolutely.
So to have that uncertainty, especially when you're driving the revenue train, is, I think there's some validity to it, but I'm glad that you have, your resources to help you pull yourself out of that. A little fun fact, and I think I said this on an episode recently, those of us who are speakers, we have our own little behind the scenes world where we understand we have this really weird life that we live, and we're very supportive of each other. And I'm not sure that audience members or meeting planners or anybody understands just how, like, we don't consider ourselves competition. We're very, we might speak on the exact same thing, but we just know how different we are about doing it. So it's like, okay, well, whoever is the right fit for that audience is who should be there. And can you imagine all the limiting beliefs that go through our brains as we take the stage? And the second we step on that stage, they're like,
I do.
We like
it's a performance. It's a performance. And it's, again, that kind of comes back to the performance the performance side of, the life I've lived and the performance opportunities that I've had and the stages that I've been able to be on. And I feel like it's an honor to be on every single stage, every
For
single
sure.
time I've ever been on a stage. It's a huge honor, but it is a performance. And there is so much that goes into that. And it is you in your case, especially, you're a single one person solo performance. And that is it is one of probably the most, at least for me, rewarding experiences, but also one of the most terrifying experiences.
It's very vulnerable.
And I think I read this quote one time. I think it was Eric Whitaker who said it was, you never get over stage fright or being terrified on stage. You just get very used to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've always kind of kept that very close to me because I don't love being on a stage, even with my crazy background. I don't love that. But I can imagine for you, I mean, and you go to places, you don't know these people necessarily. You might have a contact here or there. You get up and you get on the stage and you've got all these people looking at you, like expecting you to entertain them, teach them. That's hugely overwhelming and intimidating. So kudos to you.
Well, it's the only thing that, like, I just always remind myself there's one human being in this room who needs to hear this message that's going to do something different with their life because of it. And all I have to worry about is that one person. And if I make it about me, then it's going to be a total shiz show. And if I make it about that one person, then I can let go of everybody else's opinion and not worry about, like, if they, I mean, obviously you want to do a good job because you want the value that you bring. I mean, people are paying me. Mm-hmm. They want the value to be dispersed among all attendees. So you want that, but you can't focus on that because then you get into that, am I good enough kind of mindset. And, I don't know, it's like terrifying, but it's also the safest place because when I take the stage, it's like, I'm telling you who I am and I'm telling you what I think, and you don't get to talk back to me. Well, I don't know. You see my audiences. I go out in there and I talk to people and I bring people on stage, but
and that's the performance. That's the performance side of it. That's the artistic side, the artistry side of it. So when I actually had to be pushed as one of my stories, I had to be pushed on stage for my senior recital when I was in college.
That's awesome.
I was terrified. And so I kind of went onto the stage like that because somebody had to push me. But that's where, you have to trust what you know and what you're doing, your skills, and you get out there and you let the artistry take over because you've worked on the technical, you know your stuff.
Yeah.
You can get over that because you have the artistic side.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what you're describing. And that's how I hear it anyway.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you definitely tied a pretty bow on that with my my rambling. So as we wrap up, I've got two more questions for you, and I'll go ahead and plant the very last one, but I want to ask one before it too. So I ask every single guest, what is your final parting piece of advice for our bombshells who are or aspiring to be bold, brave, unwaveringly confident women in business? And when I say unwaveringly, I don't mean because we don't have Gertrude sitting on our shoulders or limiting beliefs. I just mean we just keep getting back up. When we get knocked down, we get back up. That is the unwavering part of it. So we'll go there next. I just want that noodling in the back of your brain. But before we go there, did you know that personal branding was a thing, and were you intentional about that, or did that just kind of naturally evolve for you? And then when that word started floating around, you're like, oh, I think I'm pretty in line there. How has that impacted you as a leader in your industry?
It's not a thing. In fact, personal branding is not anything that I've ever thought about until right now. So I've heard the term. I've never really looked into it. It's not been something that's ever been a thing for me that I've meant to look into. So no, I don't really know anything about it. So you mentioned that in the beginning and I was like, that's interesting. I don't know what my personal brand is. I mean, I'm who I am,
and that's it. That's it. That is it. When I have to get a hold of people and help them to define their personal brand so they can position it, they don't have this very grounded sense of self, and you do. And so you don't have to work at developing a personal brand because you just automatically live it. So I think that's my opinion as a personal brand practitioner, how I see it.
After we get done, I'm gonna be like personal brand Google. I've heard the term. I don't know, like I said, I just don't know much about it, but I'm going to look into it.
Yeah. Well,
It's interesting to me.
I've got some assessments to send you.
Okay.
Graciously curious. So, all right. So full circle back to what parting piece of advice would you give to a bombshell?
I would say whatever it is, just do it. Like it's the, sometimes I think about the things that have held me back at different times. And in the end, it was always just a matter of, well, guess I just got to do it. And it's, you can sit in that like holding pattern for a long time and weigh the pros and weigh the cons. And, I mean, so I think there's that. It was interesting that you mentioned the fall get up. I had just posted that on LinkedIn, this picture that I keep of myself completely wiping out, like on my face, like it's these two pictures I have, and I keep them. I don't keep them at my desk. I really should. I would love to have like pulled it out and showed it to you, but they are these pictures of me, just absolutely wiping out. And I keep them because I think it's really important. It's the whole concept of you fall, you get back up, and what is it? Fall however many times, get back up +1.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the same thing. It's just, just do it.
Yeah.
Action it, make it happen. And if you make a mistake, I mean, welcome to my world. I make a lot of mistakes and you just do it again, or you do something different, and I think that's honestly been something, I can easily handicap myself by overthinking and thinking about what I should do, what I shouldn't do, what will happen if I do this, what will happen if I don't. And in the meantime, hours, days, weeks later, I just end up having to do it. And that was the answer in the beginning.
Yeah.
You just have to do it. And
you can save, like, it's like anxiety now that you develop yourself, or anxiety in the moment of having to deal with a problem that choose your hard.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm glad that we've had this time together, and I appreciate
Likewise.
you sharing everything with our bombshells.
Well, it was an honor to be here, pleasure. And I'm so glad that we've gotten to know each other over the last year or so, and best of everything to you too.
Thank you. All right, bombshell, you know what to do. Go to amberhurdle.com/podcast with an S at the end. And then you can find the show notes for this episode and all of the episodes in the archives. So you can find out how to connect with Sarah on LinkedIn. We'll put all of the different ways that you could check out her company or anything else that might be interesting to you to learn from Sarah, her experience, and her unintentional yet very strong personal brand. Speaking of branding, it really blesses the Bombshell Business Podcast brand if you go in and leave a rating and review on your favorite listening app, give it a like, share on YouTube, and make sure that other bombshells have access to amazing people like Sarah, who are teaching us how to become more bold, brave, and unwaveringly confident in our business and lives. And I will see you on the next episode.